Hey crafting, quilting, and sewing friends, it's your favorite sewing and quilting YouTuber, Carolina Moore here, and I'm so excited to share with you that I've updated my locked stocking pattern, and I want to share with you the details of it, and I'm going to take you step by step through sewing the locked stocking. Now you still will need the locked stocking pattern in order to follow along, so you want to go down to the link in my profile to get that pattern. But let's go ahead and get started with some of the fun things about this pattern. First, it's a stocking, and you can make it in all kinds of bright, fun colors, but it's locked with this little latch. Now, I've also made it in some traditional colors as well, and as you can see, this one has a larger flip lock, and this one has a little smaller flip lock. We'll talk about that in a second. But you can add a actual padlock or key lock or number lock or combination lock to any of these little flip locks, and that makes it so that the stocking is secure and someone can't get inside this. So it makes it the perfect stocking to give as a teen gift or as a white elephant gift, or just a little fun on Christmas morning to send someone on a scavenger hunt around the house to unlock the stocking. And we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. So I'm going to show you how this works. They just need to be able to get the lock off, and then they can go ahead and this is a regular like purse clasp. Then they can open up and flip over this top layer of the stocking. And then you have a more traditional looking stocking that you can actually access and get into. And that's also how you fill the stocking. So you fill the stocking with whatever goodies, treats, gift cards, chocolates, whatever your heart desires. And then you flip this cuff over and you just close it up. And then it'll look like this. And it's ready for giving on Christmas Day. Super fun. The first year that I made these, I actually gave my father-in-law a fun lock stocking, and I found this really cool wooden lock that was a puzzle lock. So there's all kinds of really fun locks that you can use to put on here. Now, there's different kinds of flip locks out there. There's this Dritz flip lock. I found these at Joann's stores. You can probably also find them on Amazon. I'll go ahead and link down below for this one. And then Sally Tomato has these pocket flip locks, and those are really cute as well. And she has them in different hardware styles. I have silver. There's a gunmetal and more of a bronze color. So depending on the fabric you're using or the style that you like for the holidays, whether you want like a more old-timey finish, you can get different finishes for these locks. Now, to make life a little easier, the pattern includes a whole page of clues that you can use for numbered padlocks. So if you're using like a traditional locker padlock that needs 3 numbers, these clues go all the way up to 39. So it's perfect for a 3-number padlock. And so with your stocking, you just include the 3 clues that go along with the numbers on the padlock that you have. So for example, 21 would be earliest date for winter solstice in the northern hemisphere. So you would just write earliest date for winter solstice in the northern hemisphere, and they would have to do a little Google search and find out that that's 21, and they know the first number is 21. Let's say the number is 5. Well, there's a couple different clues that you could choose to use for 5. So it would be the number of golden rings. So that's in the song, obviously. The amount Lucy charges Charlie Brown for advice for Charlie Brown's Christmas. Where the Grinch ranks in TV Guide's 2002 50 Greatest Cartoon Characters of All Time list. So unless someone is a super trivia buff, they're definitely going to have to do a little Googling to find that. So there's at least 1 clue for every number 1 through 39, and that's included in the pattern so that you can just grab a padlock, add those clues. They have really cool locks that have letters on them. And so we went ahead and made a couple tags that would be for those letter padlocks, and you can set those letter padlocks to whatever word you want. So for example, if you use the word Nick as your code, there's an already pre-made tag here that says December 6th is my feasting day. I'm a favorite of fishermen and kids at play. Do you know who I am? Did you guess it that quick? Of course you know, I am Saint blank. Or for tree, there's cut me down and take me home. On each branch, place a glass dome. Wrap me up in lights so bright. Marvel at my beauty every night. And the answer to that is tree. There's one more, and let's see if you can guess the answer to this little poem. Some people place me on the tree, shining bright for all to see. I sparkle bright from way up high, twinkling in the night sky. And the answer to that, of course, is star. So once they figure out the clues in the poem, they can unlock that word padlock. And we'll go ahead and link to the word padlock below as well, in case you want to use one of those. You can also use your own password. So it's just a 4-letter word. So if there is a name of someone in your family, and you want to have poem clues for that, you can just make your own. And there are some blank tags in here as well that you can use to make your own tags and poems. So all that's included in the pattern to make it super easy and super fun to give this as a gift. So now I have my Baby Lock Jubilant out, and we're gonna go ahead and use her to start sewing up this quilt pattern, or this stocking pattern. And I'm gonna use the Sally Tomato Flip Lock. It goes on the exact same way as the other flip lock, so the basic materials are going to be, or the basic construction is going to be the same. Supplies that you're going to need are the pattern. You're going to need your fabric. You're going to need fusible fleece. And I already have my stocking cut out, and I have my cuff pieces cut out, and I'm using Art Gallery fabrics. How fun is this? Because you can make really wild stockings. It's a locked stocking. It's begging to be, yes, you can absolutely go traditional, but it's begging to be something like flamingos or pink or teal, or just really fun, because this gets really fun and personal. Okay, so we're gonna switch on over, and I'm gonna show you how to put this all together. In making our locked up stocking, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to work on the cuff. Now there's this small cuff piece, which is actually going to be the front cuff. And then there's the large cuff piece, which is going to be the back cuff that flips over to the front. And when you're working on sewing, you want the stitch line on the top to match this color. You want to go ahead and change your thread color here. And if you don't want to change your thread color for the whole thing, you just want to do it for that one stitch, I'll tell you where that is. It's going to be when you secure it to the stocking itself. But I'm going to go ahead and use just the regular cream that I have in my machine. Now I've already cut out all my pieces according to my pattern instructions, and this stocking pattern is also in the locked up stocking pattern. There's a spot for you to overlap and tape the two pieces together because it is bigger than 8.5 by 11, but that way you don't have to go to a copy shop to make your larger copy. You can just print this on your regular home printer, which is perfect. When you cut it out, you want to make sure that you have two right sides together or two wrong sides together, because you want to make sure that you have like a right and a left facing part of your stocking. If you were to cut both pieces with the fabric facing up, you would end up with two that go the same direction, and that's not going to work for a double-sided stocking. So we'll go ahead and set this piece aside as well, and we're going to start with this large piece. We're going to fold it in half, right sides together, and we're going to stitch down this edge. Everything in this pattern is done with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So we're just going to stitch down this edge with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we're going to flip it right side out. I'm going to take this to my sewing machine, and we'll go ahead, turn you on. There we go. Now we'll go ahead and stitch. If you're a pinner, you can absolutely pin your edges together, but I'm not a big pinner if I can help it. So I'm just going to go ahead and sew. When I get to the end, I'm going to do needle up, press your foot up, and there we go. So now I'm going to flip this. Oh, before I flip it, I do want to open up this seam allowance right here. I have my iron all warmed up. And I want to just press open this seam allowance right here. And I can press it right side out. Now I want to measure so that this seam is in the middle, and that's just going to make my life easier later on. So if you look, this is 8 inches. So I just want to have this on the 4-inch line. And you can also do this with your regular ruler and line up this bottom edge. So it's about 4 inches right there. There we go. And I'm going to press this as well. To add my hardware, I'm going to measure 2 inches up and 4 3/4 inches over. So I've got my 4 3/4 inch line here and my 2-inch line here on the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and give myself a little plus sign right there. And then I'm just going to give myself, at that same 2-inch line, a little horizontal line so that it helps me with lining up my hardware in just a second. While I'm doing that, I'm going to go ahead and grab my other cuff piece. I'm going to fold this in half. If your iron's still hot, you could totally still press this. And this one I'm going 2 inches up and 4 3/4 inches over. Make my little plus sign here. And my horizontal line. So now I can add my hardware pieces. I'm going to use the pocket flip lock from Sally Tomato. And you'll find, just like with any of these purse hardware sets, there's a couple different pieces. I have the female piece, the male piece, and then I have this backer for my male piece. This female piece does use a tiny little screwdriver, so you want to make sure that you have a tiny little screwdriver handy. Now, this piece is the flap that goes over the front, the big piece, so that's going to get the female piece, and this is the bottom flap that stays in place, so this is going to get the male piece. This male piece is, to me, the easiest to put on, so I'm going to start by just taking this, centering that little plus sign right in the middle, and then just pressing down and giving it a good press so that I have a little mark on either side. Then you just take your seam ripper, and I'm only going through one layer here because I want the back of the hardware to be hidden, and I'm just going to make a tiny little rip. Don't push hard at all or you end up ripping right through your whole stocking and you'll have to redo your cuff, and that is a super bummer. Okay, so I've made tiny little holes. You can always make them bigger, but honestly, they don't need to be nearly as big as you think they need because they do stretch. I'm going to put my flip lock on through those holes, add my back. Now, for a lot of purse patterns, they say to go ahead and push these prongs in. I like to push them out because I just feel like over the larger surface area, you get a better grip or security on here. So it's up to you whether you push them in or push them out. I go ahead and push them out, and there we go. We already have one part of our hardware attached to our stocking. For our other piece of hardware here, we're going to unscrew the screws in the back. If you have a little plate or a dish to put these screws on so you don't lose them, that is a great idea. I still, somewhere in my sewing room, have one of these screws that I never found. It probably ended up getting vacuumed up somewhere. So put those somewhere where you won't lose them. Now you have your front and your back. We're going to take this front and set it aside. And now we're going to put the back. You want to center your plus sign in the middle of the large hole and then line up your small holes so they're along that horizontal line. And now with our fabric marking pen, we're going to mark this oval plus the 2 small holes. There we go. Now, using small delicate scissors, what we're actually going to do is we're going to cut all the way around and then around your little small screw holes as well. So we're going to cut like a large, long oval that kind of narrows at the sides. I go ahead and cut through one layer, and then I'll draw the back layer, and then I'll cut the back layer. And remember, you can always cut your hole a little bigger if you need, but you can't cut it any smaller. I'm going to draw my oval on the back. Yep. Just going to pull it through like this. And I'm going to go ahead and cut this one as well. All right, if we did everything well, those 2 holes will line up, and sure enough they do. Okay, so this side without the seam is going to be the front. This side with the seam is the back. So we're going to take the front of our flip block and we can put it on the front. And we're going to go ahead and look through the back. And we should be able to just kind of stretch this hole over our lock here. Now we can add the back. And assuming that we haven't lost our screws, you can just screw this all in place. Before you tighten it too tight, maybe do any last minute adjustments to make sure that it's looking nice and straight against everything. And then go ahead and tighten these down real nice and tight. And there we go, we have our hardware. And these are gonna go together. You can double check fit. If you've done everything well, your sides will line up here. If they're off by a 1/4 inch even, you're still gonna be fine. This pattern, I made sure to give you some wiggle room just in case your measuring isn't perfect or something gets misaligned when you're putting in your flip lock. So as long as you're within a 1/4 inch of it sticking out on the side, you're fine. Okay, we're already ready to start stitching some of this together. Yay, it's that fast. Okay, we have our male piece of our flip block here and our stocking. So we're gonna go ahead and take our outer stocking and we're going to line this up. And then we're going to take the lining of our stocking. Now, I like using a solid for my lining. If you want to add a little extra fun, you can totally use a fun print for your lining. If you're using a fun print, do right sides together. This solid has no right side or wrong side. That makes that simple. But if you are using a fun print, you want to do right sides together here. So I'm going to line up this edge and we'll line this up. I want now, you can see it better from the back. You can see that this cuff is bigger than the stocking itself. And just kind of center it on there and you'll be fine. And you want to, and I can see it from this side, line up the edges of your lining with the edges on your stocking front. And here I will go ahead and give it a pin or two just so that nothing shifts on my way bringing it to the sewing machine. Now I do have this flip block facing up because this is the way it's going to look when it's all put together. So if you want your stocking facing, let's see, what is this, to the left, then you'll want to use your left facing stocking here. If you want your stocking facing the other way, you'll want to grab the left facing stocking piece to do this part, because this is going to be the front of your stocking. If you have a more decorative or piece that you fussy cut, make sure that that's the piece that you're seeing right now. We're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're just going to stitch with our same 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure that you never stitch over your pins. Needle up, press your foot up. Okay. So when you flip this over, you should start to see things line up and seeing that front of your stocking. This part will be covered by the flap when it's hanging locked, but this is what it'll look like when it's unlocked and open. Okay, so we have one side done. Now we're gonna do the other side. We're gonna line up our stocking. If we cut our fabric right, we'll be able to do easily right sides together on this stocking. We're just gonna line up this edge. This is just 2 layers, so I'm not going to pin this time. And I'm just gonna stitch this right on here. We're not adding the flap just yet. All right, so I have this second piece of the stocking. I'm gonna open it up. And I'm going to press this open. Okay, and now I have the outside of my stocking and the lining of my stocking and my piece right here. This is my other cuff piece. Now I want the front of my clasp and I want it on the lining side, right? Now I'm gonna flip this over, the whole thing, and I wanna line up this seam allowance, the seam allowance on the cuff with the seam allowance on the stocking and lining. So I'm lining these up. I'm going to go ahead and give them a quick pin so they don't shift on the way to the sewing machine. There we go. And I'm going to stitch right along this right here, this like right inside the seam. And that's going to secure all these layers together. It's also going to create a line here on the front. So remember we talked about thread at the beginning. If you want your thread to match, you definitely want to swap out your bobbin thread, and if you're not sure about your tension on your machine, you want to switch out your top thread and your bobbin thread to match whatever color this is. So just do your best here. If it's not exactly perfect, it will be okay. Make sure that you keep your lining out of the way and you don't stitch it into the back of your stocking. Okay. So when you flip this over, you should be seeing the back of your hardware. And when you flip it this way, you should be having it on the cuff side. So perfect. We are really in the home stretch of making the stocking already. We're gonna flip our cuff over here. And we're going to put all of the pieces together. Now, what you can absolutely do, and I suggest you do, is that you take your clasp and go ahead and close it already. It will be really easy to open after the whole stocking's put together, but that makes sure that all of that's gonna line up because it's already together here and all lined up. Now, one thing to note is that there's a lot of layers here. We have 2, 4, 6 layers of fabric and 6 layers of fusible fleece. So you're gonna want to go slow and careful when you stitch your stocking together. So I'm just adding a couple pins. If you are a super confident quilter or sewer, you can skip the pins if you want. I do suggest that you add some pins at least the first couple times you make the stocking, because when you have this many layers, they do like to shift on you. Okay, so I've added some pins. We are going to want to make sure that we have a hole for turning, and I like to put that hole here down at the bottom of the stocking. So I'll go ahead and start here at like the ball of the foot and stitch all the way around. You're gonna do 1/4 inch seam allowance. When you get over here, you're gonna do 1/4 inch seam allowance from the edge of the stocking, not the edge of the cuff. And we're gonna go all the way around. We're gonna end up trimming all this extra cuff fabric away later on. So now I'm going to go ahead and just start here, stitch all the way around the stocking until I get to here, leaving myself a good 6 or 8 inches along the bottom of my foot. Now we are sewing a little bit of a curve here when we do the stocking. Really no stress, just kind of pivot your fabric as you sew the curve. If it starts to get too far off, lift your presser foot to pivot your fabric further, and make sure you don't stitch over your pins. Now as we get to all this bulk, you want to help your machine kind of push it down. You might need to raise your presser foot a little bit. And just go slow and careful through all those layers. Okay, we've got this all stitched around, and there are 2 things we want to do before we turn it right side out. The first is to clip off this extra here, and what we're going to do is we're going to cut this off to the 1/4 inch just to kind of get it out of the way. And then we're going to go in and try to reduce this bulk even further, which is going to help give just a smoother, cleaner edge. We want to bring this down to about 1/8 of an inch. To do the same on the other side. And that just brings down that bulk. If you want to bring down the bulk in the middle as well a little bit, that's going to make that cuff look a lot smoother at the top, because it is just a lot of layers. Okay. Just make sure that you don't cut into the stitching. If you're worried about that stitching because it was so many layers, before you do this cutting step, you can absolutely go ahead and add like another layer or a couple layers of stitching along this edge. because this is where your stocking is going to get the most love, with it getting turned right side out and inside out with that cuff to lock it and unlock it. So you want to make sure that the stitching there is secure. Okay, I've made myself a nice little mess here. And now I'm going to go ahead and clip my curves. Those scissors don't want to have a sharp point. There we go. So I'll just use the big ones. And clipping curves just means you're cutting into the seam allowance a little bit. You want to cut maybe about 3/4 of the way in. And what this does is it eases the seam allowance so that you don't get any, and I want to make sure I don't accidentally clip my lining when I clip my curves. It makes for smoother curves when you turn it right side out. If you notice any like bunching or puckering, it's because you either haven't clipped your curves at all or you haven't clipped them enough. So on the outside of the stocking, I like to just go ahead and clip all the way around all these, because there's a curve kind of here in the arch of the foot, and there's a curve all the way around the toes, and I want to give it some kind of room to breathe around the toes. On these outside curves like this, you can actually cut out little notches if you want, with these little triangles like this, and pull out those notches, and that'll give you a little more room in that toe. But for the stocking, I find that just clipping the curve straight like this is fine. All right, I've clipped my curves, and now I have this nice big hole that I gave myself. I'm gonna reach my hand through. Now I did lock this flip lock, but it just pops right open with my hand. And I've got all my extra little pieces that I trimmed that are trying to get a ride here on my stocking, and I want to make sure I remove those. There we go. I'm just going to put my hand all the way to the toe, grab the toe with my hand, and then gently pull it through that lining. Whew, I love those colors together. Now you can go ahead and take your stocking here. I suggest going ahead and putting it all together before you, like testing it, making sure the lining fits right before you close up this hole in the sole, in the ball of the foot. But to close this up, I'm just going to show you, since we're here right now, you're going to fold this with about a 1/4 inch seam allowance on the inside. You can add a couple pins, and you're just going to stitch this closed. If you want, you can hand stitch this closed as well. For now, we're just going to go ahead and tuck this in. And with my hand, I can pop out all those curves. There we are, stocking. Now let's lock up the stocking, and by that we're going to take this cuff, bring it over to the front. Now there is a lot of bulk in this cuff, so ease it all together. You definitely don't want to take scissors and poke them into these corners to really stab them out, because you can easily get a hole in your stocking. Just kind of use your fingers and poke it out. And then I've got my flip lock here. I'm gonna tuck it in, make sure it lines up. And there we go. I've got my lock stocking. If you want to be able to hang your stocking, you just take a ribbon here and you're gonna stitch it on to the side here, and that way you'll have a hook to be able to hang your stocking from. Or if you're someone who just sets the stocking by your person's door or foot of the bed in the mornings, then having it without a hook is also just fine. So that's the locked up stocking pattern and how you put it all together for a fun and different surprise on Christmas morning. Okay, now wasn't that so much fun? And honestly, so much easier than you thought it was going to be, right? Make sure that you go down to the links below that I have for you on all the supplies and the pattern to be able to make your own locked stocking. I really hope that you have fun making these for your family, and that locked stockings with the little poems and treasure hunts and tricks become a tradition in your family. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, leave those down below, and make sure you're subscribed to this channel. I have so much more fun coming your way, so I'm going to see you right here real soon. Hit subscribe and that bell, and you'll know as soon as I have a video up. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, friends.